there were many changes that I went through, ups and downs. And I had a person that I like to say was a guidance to me. He was a, what I would call he had positive regard that was unconditional. So meaning that no matter what I was going through, this person seen the best in me and seen the best of my thinking and was like what I would call a surrogate thinker until my thoughts became healthier. Does that make sense? So in that process of me going through these ups and downs, that person, which was a mentor with unconditional positive regard, he introduced me to someone who invited me to a class that could help me to gain perspective on myself, to gain perspective on what was happening with my interactions with my peers, my community, and my family. And one of the things that I was most moved by this particular connection was that it was almost like redevoting me back to my grandmother, who now I live with and is 97 years old. And this person that I was introduced to was saying, you need to go back and be there for her, and you need to be there for her in a very consistent way. So the person that I'm talking about is here with us today, and I want to introduce you to her. She is an activist, a very powerful woman. She is my shero. She is monumental in helping young men. That is her passion, continuing to help young men to get closer to themselves. In fact, she developed a program and a curriculum called Discovering Your True Self. So I would like to introduce to you, class, Miss Phelicia Jones, who is here with us.
All right. How you doing? So, again, my name is Phelicia Jones, and historically born and raised in San Francisco in the Bayview, Hunters Point district. I've had a lot of things that happened in my life. I've had two sisters brutally murdered, and due to the grief that I was experiencing behind their murder, I ended up on crack. I was always a square, what they consider a square in my community, and ended up on crack. And in the Black community, we suffer in silence. And why do I say that? Because when you are growing up, in our household, we are told from infants, what goes on in this house stays in this house. What goes on in this house stays in this house. So, and not in the ability to recognize my own grief, I began to suffer in silence behind my two sisters' murder. And a good friend of mine asked me one day, had I ever used crack? And I said no. But let me back up a little bit. Before that, I was the youngest corporate officer in Wells Fargo Bank back in the day. The youngest one in the whole corporation of Wells Fargo National Association. And what happened then, after my first sister, Vanessa, got murdered, I was devastated, but my instructions from my family and from my community was one that I had to be strong for my mother and father. And I put on a cape and I tried to play that role. And then my second sister, Sandra, got murdered. Vanessa was murdered in '79. I'm telling my age a little bit. My second sister, Sandra, she was murdered in '85. And it was my duty from a family friend that I had to bury my second sister. That I had to learn how to do this at a very young age by a family friend. And the reason why he said I had to do it, because it was going to be my responsibility to bury my mother and father one day, and I had to know how it would be done. And so he showed me how to do everything from A to Z. A to Z. I was about 26, 27 years old. How old are you guys? Who's the oldest in here maybe? Who's under 25? Raise their hand. So all of you are under 25. So I'm quite sure no one had, or you're not even expected to take on a task like that, but I was. And so after I buried my second sister in 1985, again, as I indicated, I was suffering in silence. And a friend of mine asked me, had I ever used crack? Had I experimented with drugs? Yeah, I experimented with smoking, didn't like it. Experimented with marijuana, didn't like it. Experimented with dropping a pill or two, didn't like it. I never really liked drugs. But then grief overwhelmed me, and when the person who I respected asked me had I ever used crack, I said no. And so they were like, try it. And so I tried it, and I liked it. Look, she's like, I liked it. And what I liked about it was it allowed me to take my pain away. And then I began to be a closet user. Nobody knew I was using. And then about a year, year and a half, I just kind of came out because now my addiction is strong. And then I began to sell crack for my own habit. And then I began to get busted, go to jail, get out, go to jail, get out. And my mother and father were so disappointed in me because I was the youngest and they were looking for me to be that one, you know. And in 1988, my mother always used to tell me, why are you waiting so old to decide to use drugs? She said, girl, you're gonna paint your wagon red and you're gonna have to pull that wagon. And so it was December 1988. I was going into probably about my third year of addiction. And I had got on my knees and I prayed to God and said, God, if you let me get high to New Year's, I promise I'm gonna go get in the program. In December 22nd, 24th, the task force came and got me. And my mother was crying, my father was upset, and I looked at my mom and I said, Mom, I said, my wagon is fire engine red. In my spirit, I knew I was going to prison. And so in 1989, February 1989, I went to prison. I was sentenced, I was looking at 12 years. And the DA in San Mateo told me, well, if you take 4 years, we'll take away all the enhancements. You do 4 years, every day you serve, you will get a day off. And so that's what I did. So I ended up in prison. My number was W31530. I have been to every state penitentiary in the state of California, with the exception of 2. I was released April 5th, 1991. And I had a boulder on my shoulder. Even though I knew I had paid my debt to society, the boulder on my shoulder was just dragging me around. And so I was like, okay, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? They give you $200 gate money, and I'm like, what am I going to do? How am I going to get more money after I spend this? And so my best friend said, girl, I ain't never seen you scared to spend money. Because I would spend some money, honey. I had the best of everything, honey. Designer, I was carrying Louis Vuitton at 16. And so, you know, this fad about Louis Vuitton, it was nothing for me. Louis Vuitton, Gucci, Pucci, and Fiorucci, you know, all the designers, you know, going to the club and popping bottles, you know, back in the day. But I decided that, well, shoot, I don't know what I'm going to do. Let me go get on welfare. And they told me, oh, you're not qualified. I said, I'm not qualified. I said, that's my money. I've been paying into the system I started working at 16. I came home, I think around 32. I'm like, I've been paying into the system for over 20 years now. That's my money. I need it. And they were like, you have a car, so you can't get general assistant. I was like, the car is inoperable. And I asked to speak to her supervisor. Then I asked to speak to the other supervisor. And then finally I got a supervisor who said, okay, if you go to DMV and you can prove this car is inoperable, then we'll give you general assistance. So that's what I did. So back in the day, right, I got out April 5th, 1991. So back in the day, they had just started, you had to work in order to get general assistance. And so they sent me all over doing some old stupid jobs, putting boxes together, going to Sunset Magazine and Palo Alto and peeling off price labels and putting another price label on. Then they talk to you in such a degrading way. And I was like, ooh, I can't do this because one, I'm very outspoken. And I was just like, you can't talk to me in any manner that you choose to. It just can't happen. And so I said, well, what am I going to do? As I was struggling, you know, with GA. And then a little voice said, well, Phelicia, go back to school. I always wanted to go to college. But in San Mateo, a white counselor told me that my father made too much money and I couldn't go to college. And so I went straight into corporate America. And so I said, well, I'm going to go back to school. And I went back to school. I completed my BA degree in sociology. I completed my master's degree in counseling psychology with emphasis on chemical dependency, counseling psychology with emphasis on chemical dependency. And I began to run my own nonprofit, which is Hope Preservation, Inc. I began to develop programs for marginalized African American youth. I developed mentoring programs, peer mentoring programs, HIV programs, anti-tobacco programs, all in San Mateo County. And then someone said, oh, Phelicia, they got some money up there at San Bruno Jail. And I was like, money in San Bruno Jail? I was like, okay. I need some of that money. Let me go up to San Bruno Jail and see what's going on. So I got into San Bruno Jail, and me not realizing the part of the jail I was in, I did not know it was a jail. So when the guys came out for a mentoring program, it was called the City of Hope. I saw everybody in orange, and I'm like, where are they coming from? Because the part we were in did not look like a jail. And so I kept going up there, kept going to the jail once a week, thinking that I was going to get me some money, get me a contract, a big fat contract. And then it appeared like, oh, ain't nothing happening here. And then the guy starts saying to one of my colleagues, George, you need to hire her. You need to hire her. And he was like, you looking for a job? I was like, not really. But at the time, I had finished my BA and I was going back to school for my master's. And I said, well, okay. I'll do it. And so I started working in San Francisco Sheriff's Department. Not as a full-time employee, but as a contractor, as an employee for a contractor who was contracted with San Francisco Sheriff's Department. So fast forward, I have always been a community activist. At the age of 16, I was running summer programs. I was an African dance teacher. I was doing all kinds of things in my community. And one of my mentors, Dr. Zelty Crawford at College of San Mateo, he used to always tell me, Phelicia, you scared of success. And I'm like, I ain't scared of success. And so I just kept pushing myself. And I began to really like sociology. I was like, oh, this is my field, you know what I'm saying? And so now here I am working for San Francisco Sheriff's Department, developing programs for incarcerated and post-incarcerated inmates as an ex-felon. I'm an ex-felon. 27 years out from the penitentiary. And so developing programs. And then I got hired by San Francisco Sheriff's Department October 8th, 2008. And then I joined the union, right? You had to join the union. And then about a few years after that, the Sheriff's Department began to just target me because I am outspoken. I'm not gonna bite my tongue. I'm an unapologetically black woman. I'm not gonna apologize for being black. I ain't gonna apologize for liking fried chicken. I'm not gonna apologize for liking watermelon. I'm not gonna apologize for being loud. I'm not going to do it. I'm not gonna bow down to you if you don't know how to talk to me with respect. And I don't have a problem with telling you that. And so with some of these characteristics, right? And the status quo society that we live in, right? Come on, talk back to me. Don't look at me like I'm a stranger now. I know y'all young, but y'all been going through some stuff too now. And so it becomes to be like you're targeted. And so what do? Do you stand up or do you sit down on racism? Do you stand up or do you sit down on equality? Do you stand up or you sit down on justice? Do you stand up or do you sit down on freedom? I choose to stand up. I choose to stand up. And so again, working in my community, loving my community, seeing how oppressed my community is, seeing how the inequalities, the inequities that rains down on my community, I have to fight. I have to fight for freedom. I choose to fight for justice. I choose to fight for equality. And I began to fight for the African American community. I really like saying black, the black community. And I don't like the status quo of people of color. Well, what color are we? Well, you black for black folks, brown for Latino, Asian. So why can't we say black and brown? This people of color thing, I mean, that's something y'all need to change because that's not cool, right? Or do you guys like it? Or do you just go with the flow? Coming here to this school is expensive. The education here is not cheap. And when I speak to university students who want to get into the field of sociology, want to get into the field of administrative justice, want to get into the field of working with marginalized communities, my thing is, well, where have you interned in those communities? And the majority of you haven't interned nowhere. But you want to come work in the community, right? How many want to work in the community? Raise their hand. Okay? And so my advice to you is to come into the community intern in the community, get to know the community, and then you will be able to work with the community. You see? And so, looking at the disparities of black people in San Francisco, I decided with my union to take on the disparities of black people around the issues of health, education, mass incarceration, employment, and housing. And so we tried, that's huge to take on. And the disparities in San Francisco is huge. Because you know, for black people, we're all segregated. Bayview, Potrero Hill, Sunnydale, Fillmore. But 25, 30 years ago, they came through and gentrified the Fillmore and took all those beautiful Victorian homes. That was a black community, a thriving black community back in the day. Thriving. And they decided to come in and tell them you couldn't, the codes, you weren't up to code. They didn't have the money to bring their homes up to code, and so they lost them. And what do you have in the Fillmore now?
Tiny shops.
Huh?
There are shops like boutiques, and there's just restaurants, and there's.
You have wealth.
Yeah.
You have wealth. And black people are not owning any of the wealth, but that used to be a thriving black community, right? And so now you look at it, gentrification all over San Francisco. And now it's affecting all of us. It's not just black and brown people, but everybody. I was reading a couple of months ago, in order to buy a home in San Francisco, you have to make $400,000. Wow, that's a lot of money, isn't it? $400,000? The average one bedroom in San Francisco is what? $3,750. An average two bedroom is anywhere from $45,000 to $5,000. People are literally renting little spaces as small as a closet here in San Francisco for $1,000, $1,200, $1,500 a month. It's so sad. And so when we began to mobilize and work on these issues, it became a lot for us, the community people I was working with. So in December 2015, I said, okay, well, let's take a break. Come back in January and let's decide which 2 or 3 of the disparities we want to work on. Okay? And so it had to be late November. Mario was murdered December 2nd, 2015. Now, mind you, there were Trayvon, there was a lot of police murders going around the nation of unarmed black men. But I wasn't called to do that work. You know, I would look at the news like probably a lot of you do and say, oh wow, that is so sad. You know, and your life goes on. So when Mario was murdered, they had a vigil. I was at the vigil. And then they had another meeting at this particular church, a landmark church, black church in San Francisco. And one of my young people, because I developed programs for brothers who are in jail. One is called Discovering Your True Self, and one is called Project Breakthrough. And my thing was to be able to plant seeds of hope in inmates that they would truly believe they do not have to live like this. For young black and Latino men, I designed a program to address their motto in which they are willing to die by. That's money, sex, drugs, guns, and gangster rap. And so one of my young brothers had got out of prison. And so I'm laying in bed, and he calls me and he says, Miss J, Are you going to the meeting tonight for Mario Woods? And I was like, nah, I'm at home. I'm cool. I'm relaxed. Nah, I'm not going. Miss J, you not going? I said, no, Mr. Belazane, I'm not going. He said, Miss J, you have to go. I said, why do I have to go? He said, because I'm Mario Woods. You have to go for me. And when he said that, my heart sunk. I was like, wow, let me get up, because I'm dedicated to these young people and helping them change their lives. So I got up, went to the meeting, and what happens a lot of times when you see community people going to these types of meetings behind police brutality, behind police murder, we are never allowed to display our suffering and our pain. We never have a safe place to talk about what we are truly feeling before we are shut down. And so that's what happened. They shut the meeting down. And so we're standing out in the parking lot, and community members start coming to me saying, oh, Phelicia, you got to do something. Phelicia, you have to do something. I'm like, no, I don't. I don't have to do anything. I'm on vacation. We're not coming back to 2016. And people just start coming, Phelicia, you have to do something. Phelicia, you have to do something. And I'm like, no, I do not. But it was so many people coming to me, telling me I had to do something, until I said, okay, let's meet at the Union Hall. I called Minister Christopher from the Nation of Islam, because I have heard him speak. He was a great orator, still is a great orator, and asked him to come to this meeting. And that night, a week after the incident, Justice for Mario Woods Coalition was born. Justice for Mario Woods Coalition was born. You guys have it? And I didn't see this tape when I decided to step out as a calling to develop Justice for Mario Woods Coalition. I saw the tape later on, afterwards, but here's the tape. How many of you have heard of Mario Woods? Raise your hand. Okay. What did you think?
Last Tuesday, we were told that you'd come and visit, and I didn't know about Mario Woods until then. I hadn't heard of it. Just simply something I hadn't heard of. Mm-hmm. But as an assignment, we had to read the article and watch the film here. And it was disturbing.
Disturbing. Okay. Kayla, where you from, Kayla?
I'm from Rancho Cucamonga, California. I'm from Southern California.
Oh, okay.
So that's why I have a little accent.
That's okay. Okay. And you, how did you hear about Mario?
So similar to Andrew, I heard about it last Tuesday. But when I read the article and watched the video, I was also disturbed. But there was this part in the article that kind of bothered me. It basically called out this one. It was like there was a police shooting, obviously, and it kind of called out this one African American cop, and it said one African American cop shot him, and it kind of bothered me because it kind of fit into the idea of black on black crime, almost. And yeah, I didn't like that. I felt like if you're gonna talk about police, why not add everyone's race? Why not single out one person?
So he was surrounded by 9 police officers. 5 decided to shoot. The black policeman took the first shot. They shot at him 41 times. with 21 bullets piercing his body. In America, our society that we live in, you wouldn't even do a dog like that. He was executed, murdered, unjustly. And, you know, when we think about these crimes in San Francisco and other places, in your spirit, do you want to do something? Do you want to fight against it? Or, you know, do your lives just continue to go on? And, you know, I'm majoring in psychology, I'm majoring in law, I'm majoring in, you know, American criminal justice. You know, this is what I have to do. It's no part of you that makes you concerned to want to do something about it, to be able to make a difference. You guys ready? Okay, so let's look at it.
Oh my fucking God, drop! Oh my God, drop it! Drop it! Just drop it! Just drop it! Just drop it! Just drop it, please! Oh my God! Oh my God! Oh my God!
What's the
Are you fucking serious?
Stay back!
Are you fucking serious? Are you fucking serious?
Knock it off!
Are you fucking serious?
Oh
Are you
my
fucking serious?
God!
Oh my God! Listen, you haven't shoot him that many fucking times! They should have fucking grabbed that fucking knife from us! Fucking time, you got fucking stuff! I said, I got it on camera! I got that shit on camera! You couldn't grab that knife from him! It's just, how many shots was that? How many fucking shots was that? How many fucking shots was that? This person is dead! This person is no, this person is fucking dead! Like he's a fucking animal!
Wouldn't drop the knife, Mama.
You
You can't take that chance.
You couldn't grab the
You can't
knife!
take that chance.
You can't take that fucking chance!
He's already stabbed
Oh
somebody.
my God, you want to bring him back to life? That was the most traumatic thing I've ever seen in my motherfucking life. That was the fucking craziest shit I just seen in my fucking life.
First they shot him with bean bags. So that was a force when he dropped down, you know, and he was walking along the wall. There was community people out there, children out there. The sister who filmed it, she was on the bus. And so you look at the trauma that goes on in Black and brown communities and police brutality, victims of police brutality, and it's okay. How can you kill unarmed Black men, but yet and still these white terrorists, you manage to bring them in alive? What's up with that? You know what I'm saying? Do you think about that? What are some of your thoughts? What's your name, sister?
Valerie.
Hi, Valerie.
Hi. The one thought, it's like, it always brings me anger, especially with, what's his name? I forget his name. Dylan, that one
Yeah,
kid
who killed
shot
all
him.
the people in the church?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Especially,
Dylan Root.
yeah, Dylan Root.
Mhm.
It makes me more mad that, because knowing after, like, not only did they bring him alive, they also bought him food.
Yeah, they took him to
Before,
McDonald's.
before they brought him to the station, they bought
Right.
him food. Like,
Yeah.
and so they're like, like, this poor guy, like, probably was mentally ill,
Mhm.
and like, and they buy him food and all this, but like with everybody else, like colored people,
That's okay.
Yeah, I know.
You're used to saying it. You're used to saying it. That's all right. Don't
black
worry.
men and brown men are being killed and like shot like animals or executed
Mm-hmm.
for something less than what Dylan Root did.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And probably not even what, like, he was suspected to be the person that they were looking for.
Mm-hmm.
And they didn't have a concrete proof and they shot him dead because he just happened to look like him.
Okay. All right. Anybody else want to speak on it? Tell me your name, sister.
Gia.
Gia. Hi,
Yeah.
Gia.
Hi. I think there is some sort of systematic reason why people in police-like positions are murdering black and brown people before they're murdering white people. It's like they're seeing these men and these women as dangerous just because of how they were trained or how they were taught, and it's just a bigger ideal that it's so hard to just be like, hey, stop shooting that, because then you have to tackle that whole system and that whole ideology that has been rooted in like America since slavery. So.
Okay. Anybody else? When we first started out, there were over 300 people coming to meetings seeking that they wanted justice. We had over 30 organizations, people from all walks of life. In the end, what we stand up for, what we fight for, is equality, justice, and freedom for all. And so with that, starting out with 300, and people have different agendas, and some people didn't want to follow black leadership, then they switch off and they go and they start their own thing, and you know, Minister Christopher was this, Felicia's too demanding, whatever. You know, you wanted to do your own thing. And a lot of people did. But wealth and disparities in the black community, justice for Mario Woods, coming on 3 years. December 2nd is his 3rd annual execution. And I don't have 300 people standing behind me, but I sure have a mighty team standing with me. And so I want you to meet them. So these are more or less the backbone that keeps me focused, keeps me doing what I do. And of course, the guy with the camera who started with me at the beginning when there was 300 people is Mr. Tom Brown. Oh yeah, I forgot y'all right into the tag, that's the good thing. Okay, Tom Brown. And then GB. GB's been with me, her and her husband Saul, who can't be here. She has been with me since the very beginning. This is GB. Then next was Marty. Marty's been there from the beginning too, right Marty? Come on down, Marty. Come on down. And then Lisa came wandering in to a meeting one night. And I was looking at Lisa like, okay, what's going on? Because she's so polite and, you know, she was quiet, you know, and after you've gone through some stuff with these coalitions, you become a little suspicious, right? But you don't say anything, you know, you don't say anything, but I'm like, okay, where is she? And so she comes in and then she disappeared for a while, then she came back, and I'm like, oh, okay. And then I'm like, all right, and she just kept hanging around. So here she is, my backbone. And then what happened was Rick Perez, his son Petey Perez was murdered by Richmond police. And so he and his wife Julie, lovely couple, as they fight for justice for his son, he also stands with us as we stand with them to fight for justice for Mario Woods. And then Ben, I don't know how I met Ben. was it Surge? No.
Surge or Indivisible, or both of them.
Huh?
Surge or Indivisible. Or both.
Indivisible, I
Yeah.
believe. I think you guys had asked me to come and speak.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then we were sitting around, and then Ben came. Silent but mighty Ben. I love him. And so this is just half of our core team, you know, and then we reach out to others. When we do our marches, when we do our rallies, you know, I'm reaching out to some of y'all right now. Because we need some of y'all because to build us a web page, to show us some how to get on Twitter, to show us how to do some other social media things that you guys know about, right? I don't know nothing. I'm old fashioned, right? I'm like, put that phone down, you know. Ben B's like, Phelicia, look, what happened to my Facebook? It just disappeared. Well, let me see your phone, you know. I'm like, here, take it. But anyway, this is our team, and we've done some mighty work. And so let's begin to look at the work that we have done. Okay.